New Orleans, a city of mystery, a city that 1 million people proudly call home, at least the ones above ground, because New Orleans is also home to many beings that can't find their way back. Watch as our group of paranormal investigators attempt to discover these lost souls. Join us as we explore New Orleans, the most haunted city in America. Tonight we'll do a pub crawl through a few of the most haunted taverns in the French Quarter. Their stories involve everything from pirates and vampires to sailors and nuns. So come with us as we discover a few bars that offer spirits of a different kind.
It seems that the legend or the folklore about Lafitte's blacksmith shop, had he owned it, is that it was used as cover for a black market operation, which makes a lot of sense when you consider the fact that nearly everyone at that time would need the assistance of a blacksmith. Anyone, no matter what walk of life, poor or rich, could go in there, conduct business with a blacksmith, and conduct a dirty deal on the side. Nobody would be the wiser. Perfect cover. But as far as the hauntings that relate to that, people getting tapped on the shoulders, their backside slapped, their hair pulled. There have been items that have just fallen off the ice making machine onto their heads, you know, when they know they've got a rubber mat up there and nothing can slide off. Jason, one of their bartenders, remembers watching a man coming around the front of the bar. And in this particular instance, he's just walked right out the St. Philip Street door. But there's a huge step down right there at that far side of the bar, and this guy just glides on by like it doesn't exist to him. Hell, there's even an incident where they've seen a woman in mourning and dressed in black with a veil. Again, Jason was actually working a double shift. He's actually taking a little nap on the sofa upstairs. He hears footsteps coming up the wooden stairs, peeked out with one eye, and sees a woman walk into the room, walks across the floor into the supply closet where they keep a lot of the liquor. Being half asleep, he just kind of went back to sleep and probably realized, wait a minute, that person doesn't work here. They look like they're here for a funeral. Then he walks over to the supply closet. There's no woman in a black dress. Just gone. Now, when they close the place down at night, they leave the intercom system on, so anybody who's up in the office can listen to those who are mopping the floors downstairs, paying attention to what they're doing. They will occasionally hear conversations over this intercom system, but what they don't expect are conversations in French or Spanish, and they often escalate in what sounds like an argument, and it tends to end when you hear what I assume is the sound of a blade escaping from a scabbard. You don't hear it being thrust into the victim, but sometimes you can hear the blood gurgling up in the victim's mouth. So I think what happened was a long time ago, there was a dirty deal going on behind the building. Somebody didn't like the way it was progressing. So they just pinned this guy up against the wall, gutted him right there. And here he is, had his life snuffed out just by trying to conduct a business deal. And I'm going to be a very irate spirit haunting this place for a while. I don't think I could let go of that. So that being said, it's quite possible that there are pirates haunting Jean Lafitte's blacksmith shop.
This is Haunted New Orleans.
We're in the back courtyard of MRB, Mississippi River Bottom, one of the preeminent local dive bars in the city of New Orleans. The thing I find most interesting about this place is, like many places in the city of New Orleans, it has had a different past. At one point, apparently, it's kind of hard to tell. I think it's 1840s, 1850s, this place was actually used as a brothel for sailors. We're only about 60 feet away from Decatur Street. Decatur Street at that time was called Levee Street. There was nothing closer to the river than the levee. So we were just approximately 80 feet away from where the ships pulled in. Where's the first place any sailor is going to go to spend his cash money after months at sea? Of course, he's going to find women, he's going to find liquor. There is a young lady who works here. Her name is Marie. Now, Marie, we don't have much of a physical description at all, really. I mean, this is just an old piece of folklore and legend that's handed down time and time and time again. But Marie apparently worked here as one of the young ladies in this establishment. And Marie was given an offer of marriage by a young gentleman, a regular customer of hers, a sailor. Now, this is actually something that was not uncommon in the history of the United States at all. If you think about it, a woman who had no way to control her money, no way to control her life, a bad family at home, she could become a prostitute without any problem at all and make her own cash. And it was a miserable life, and nobody really cared for it. The thing is, though, oftentimes these women would get an offer for marriage from a regular customer. Of course, they'll say, "Hell yes, I will." And that way they can move elsewhere and become a respectable matron. This is the history of our country most people don't realize. With Marie, however, things were going to take a little bit of a different turn. She accepted the offer of marriage joyfully. Her betrothed went off to the Gulf of Mexico for one more trip to make more money for the wedding, during which time she got her wedding gown made. The other girls were all excited for her. She was excited beyond belief to finally get out of the life that she hated. And then the news came back in that he had died while he was at sea. Now, we don't know if it was a storm or disease or anything could have killed a sailor in the Gulf of Mexico in the 1850s. But Marie was so distraught by what had happened, she put on her wedding gown, came into this area, which, if I'm not mistaken, was used as a stable in the time period, and approximately 2 foot, 3 feet above where I am and slightly in front of me, she hung herself from a beam in her wedding gown. Now, why do I say 2 foot, 3 foot ahead and above me? Because that's where the orbs are seen. I mean huge soap bubble-sized orbs, like a head-sized, hanging in the area where she allegedly hung herself. But the thing that was the creepiest of all, approximately a week or two after that, I'd finished my tour back in this courtyard area. We were all leaving, everybody was gone, one lady was hanging behind. She walked up to me and said, "You might want to see this." She'd taken a picture of me while I was standing over here on the stage. And I was talking about Marie. And standing approximately 4 feet away from me was a completely and utterly visible apparition, misty white. But you could see what looked like a white wedding train, and even the hands folded neatly, as she listened to me tell people about how she committed suicide 150 years ago. Can you imagine anything more strange than having the dead listen to you while you tell about how they ended their life? It's the kind of thing that makes you want to get it right.
Stay tuned for more haunted New Orleans.
Both Turtle Bay and Ruby Fruit Jungle share the same history in that the entire block of Decatur Street in the 1100 block was once convent property. It belonged to the Ursuline Convent and was used as a hospital for yellow fever victims. During the 1700s and 1800s, yellow fever was a very mysterious disease. People died by the thousands here in New Orleans, so of course we needed a large hospital facility, and this is what it served as. The courtyard in Turtle Bay was actually used as part of a cemetery for the yellow fever victims in the early 1700s.
We were absolutely a penal colony. And the idea of vampires coming to New Orleans is something that's very, very much rooted in our history. Part of the early problem with founding the city of New Orleans is that we had no women at all. It was so bad that the men were running off into the bayous and being killed and eaten by the local Indians trying to find Indian women. So they began to try and figure a way to get large numbers of women here. They had limited success until they finally realized that simply just lying was the way to go. They put posters that showed this beautiful city of gold, literally almost with cobblestone streets that were paved in nuggets. Rich gentlemen. The simple fact is, these women came here, and when they came here, they were issued boxes by the court of France. Now, this is all history. It's not folklore, it's not legend, it's the history of the place. The box we could easily describe as a distressingly familiar size.
These ladies were called Casket Girls because they came to this country with large wooden boxes that vaguely resembled coffins. They were actually brides for the settlers. They were housed and educated by the Ursuline nuns and eventually married off to the settlers in the city.
They'd gotten as close. The first shipment of Casket Girls got as close as Mobile, Alabama, a few days down the coast. But while they jumped ship, because they were told it was waiting for them here, the ship and its cargo came to the city of New Orleans, and the only men who didn't know everything had changed were the extremely violent, extremely superstitious, and heavily armed men of the city of New Orleans. These men, instead of pretty girls, watched boxes of a distressingly familiar size getting unloaded and laid in gleaming rows to only be picked up by the last people they ever would have expected to comfort them, agents from the Catholic Church. They were taken and they were placed inside the convent's attic. But at that point, the city of New Orleans begins to get its vampire legends.
It has become our vampire folklore that suggests that these women are responsible for bringing the vampires from Europe here to New Orleans. It's pretty easy to understand if you look at what was going on in France at the time. The Inquisition was still quite alive and well during the early 1700s. In fact, they were kind of winding down on the witch hunts and the witch burnings at that time, and the church had started the vampire hunts of the Inquisition. They were breaking open graves, cutting off heads, burning bodies. So of course, these settlers coming from a culture where the talk of vampires was very, very commonplace, it's easy to understand that when they see a group of women coming in carrying large coffin-like boxes, that the talk of vampires would spread through the streets of New Orleans very early on in the 1700s. Where it becomes particularly interesting, though, is that section of Decatur Street, where Turtle Bay and Ruby Fruit Jungle are located, by 1989, that became the vampire capital of the United States.
It makes you wonder very much, though, if this is just all a strange coincidence, in that the vampire subculture that started in New Orleans really blossomed in the late 1980s, has a strange resonance with the legend of vampires in the attic of an old convent. Who could say?
You're watching Haunted New Orleans.
Flaherty's was always one of the great Irish pubs. Now this city, of course, being the second largest point of Irish immigration in the United States, second only to New York City. A lot of people don't realize that. And it was top 10 list of Irish pubs to go to in the United States. John and Mary Wheaton purchased in 1803 the building after the Louisiana Purchase. They were Americans. They moved down here, and John passed away. Later on, after her period of mourning, Mary Wheaton would take up with a Joseph Baptandier, and she did not realize that he was engaging in plissage. Plissage is where you would take a young woman of color and use her as a mistress and bestow upon her wealth and things like that, and and then more romance, and you had the steady relationship of the wife, and you also had the mistress. Usually it was young men who were doing this, not married men. So it was fairly scandalous. So when this mistress, Angelique, came to his house, luckily Mrs. Wheaton was away, or Mary Wheaton was away, but the husband did not take to this kindly at all, risking the whole thing, and she threatened to expose the entire affair. And they broke into a row. It became violent. He wound up throwing her from the interior balcony. She fell down. Her head contacted the edge of the well, which is now a fountain there, and snapped her neck clean. And she lay there. She died right there on the spot, killed, dead. He ran down quickly, grabbed tools, dragged her body over to the gardens, dug a shallow grave, buried her. And while he's taking a rest, seeing how his work looks and everything like that, he notices the face of a young servant boy who's witnessed the entire event. That young servant boy beats feet, takes off. He realizes the gravity of what he'd done. He goes back inside. His wife will notice, Mary Wheaton will notice his very distant aspect now, and over the next week. And then in the next week, he disappears entirely, and she won't have cause to find him until the following week, when she, investigating a foul smell coming from the upper reaches, goes and discovers him, where, enacting his own penance, he has hung himself from the neck until dead, and his body is hanging from the rafters. She will never again remarry, and eventually dies there of old age, and I'm sure in great confusion, wondering whatever it was that happened. And the ghosts in the building are Angelique, Mary, and Joseph Baptandier, the husband, the wife, and the mistress. Angelique is experienced in the courtyard. Joseph is experienced in the upper regions, in the upstairs areas. And Mary is still seen over what used to be the concert room. She's seen through the windows of the concert room during one particular song, during the song Red as a Rose. All the local people, musicians and whatnot, are so used to seeing her during Red as a Rose, they actually dedicate the song to her. This is Mary's song. It's Mary's favorite song. We hope she finds peace. And people will, who was that woman overlooking, standing up there overlooking? And very often they just say, was that during Red as a Rose? And they're like, oh, well, that was Mary. That was our ghost. One of our ghosts.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Tune in again next week as we take another look at the darker side of haunted New Orleans.